Hey, Vlad here, devinsideyou.com. Welcome to the last video in the Circe series. Today we're going to talk about golden testing, a topic which usually comes up in conversations related to codecs. This video should be much shorter than the others, so let's get right to it. Alright, so what is golden testing? Golden testing is a concept where your test expectations are stored in separate dedicated files instead of being hard-coded. These files are then checked into a version control system and the subsequent test runs check against them. This is also sometimes called snapshot testing. The purpose of this will become clear a bit later in the video, but essentially it's to reduce boilerplate. Now, if the tests fail unintentionally, well, you go and you change your production code same as you would with regular testing. However, if the tests fail intentionally, meaning you're changing the production code on purpose, well, you need to change those files. However, usually the testing frameworks that support golden testing, they will regenerate these files for you. So all you need to do is just to delete them. This is just one of the ways how golden testing reduces boilerplate, and Circe comes with a dedicated module for golden testing, and we're going to take it for a spin today. Our project grew a little out of hand in the previous video, so we're going to start from scratch today. However, we're going to borrow a bunch of utility functions from the previous ones. So let me open my terminal. Let me go into my dev folder, which is currently empty. I deleted everything. So we're going to start with a fresh new template. Let's call it golden playground like this. Com dev inside you and dev inside you. And let's open it with Visual Studio Code. The same as in all of my videos, we're going to remove the warnings. We're going to disable them. And I'm also going to copy paste a couple of dependencies because they're basically the same as in the previous video. So we're just going to have cat's core because Circe depends on cat's core, and we have, Circe core, Circe generic, Circe parser. Nothing major. It's the same things as we have been doing in the previous videos. All right. So while Bloop is importing, we're still using Scala 2.13.1, and we're using SBT 138. So let me go to my main file, and before we do anything, I'm actually going to go and I'm going to create a package object, because in the previous video we had a bunch of utility functions that we're going to keep using today. Okay, so actually once Bloop finishes importing, it's going to help me out creating it. All right, I think it's finished, so I can go over here and I can say new Scala file, please create a package object, and it didn't finish yet. Oh, I did. All right, cool. All right, so now I can copy paste this stuff from my script, because this is exactly what we did in the previous videos. Okay, we just have the, the function juggling things, pipe tap and tap as. We have printline good, which prints out stuff in green. We have printline band, which prints out stuff in red, and also have this printline hyphens. Okay, so now we can start with our typical hello world for Circe. Well, I like to call it hello world. Okay, so we're going to import cats implicits. So far, we're not doing anything new. Okay, I'm just setting up everything so that we can start playing around with it. Okay, so we're going to use semi-auto today, like this, and we're going to go and we're going to remove this, and maybe I'm just going to create it on top. Okay, so I'm going to have final case class person, which is a name and age. Okay, going to create an object person, so that we can put the codec in there, implicit val codec for person. Whoops, press page down accidentally, and we're going to do derive codec like this. Let's actually run SBT. I kind of forgot to run it. Okay, like this. So we can go over here and we can do, as I said, we can do our typical hello world. Okay, so now that I have this printline hyphens function, I'm actually going to use it over here. So instead of printline, I'm going to say printline hyphens, and now I can just say 100 like this, and this is going to be just the typical print line like this. Okay, let's keep running. Okay, I know that I'm talking too fast, but basically this is exactly what we did like for 3 videos right now. Okay, let me just finish typing real quick. So we're going to import io circe syntax, and we're going to import io.circe parser, and we're going to have our typical round trip. Okay, so we're going to have Alice, who is 27 years old. We're going to do as Jason. We're going to do spaces 2. Okay, and at this point we're going to print it out, print line good like this. Maybe we can actually run it. Okay, so and then we're going to do the round trip. We're going to also decode it back into person, and we're going to tap as print line hyphens. Oh, come on, there we go, print line hyphens just 100, and we're going to do by map print line bad print line Good, because I don't want to see the left and the right. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to write a test for this encoding and decoding, basically for this round trip. And we're going to start without golden testing, and also we're not going to write any example-based tests. We're going to jump straight into property-based testing, and I already have a video about that. If you want, you can check it out. So for now, we haven't actually been looking into this since forever, so let's actually go to the build, because we already have a bunch of testing dependencies in there. They're all over here, and they're all coming from the file called dependencies. If you remember the video where we set up this entire template. Okay, so let's go through them real quick. Oh, let's close the build. Okay, so we have the Scala test, so we're using Scala test, we're not using specs 2. We also using Scala check because we're writing the property-based test, and we have the module which is the integration of Scala test and Scala check. We're also using a module called Scala check shapeless, which generates arbitraries for us, right? So if we have we have the built-in arbitrary for example, string and int, and we have something like a person. If we just use this library, then we don't need to create an arbitrary for something that has a string and has an integer. Okay, it will be generated for us. All right, now let me actually make it stay like this. So all we're going to do is we're going to bring another one, right? So this is going to be io.circe, basically the same thing as at the top. Okay, it's going to be called circe. Circe testing like this, and the version is the same as above, but I put it in here because all of these they go into testing like this. All right, so yeah, let me save, let's import the changes. Let me switch back to the terminal tab. Okay, let's go and look at our test suite, right? Because we already have a test suite. This is like part of my template. Let me make this a little bit smaller like this. It looks big, but that's all there is. So we're using the any fun suite. We're using the should matchers. We're not going to use before and after each today because we're not going to set up anything. We're using the Scala check property checks, which means that we can write the the property-based tests, and this one comes from Scala check shapeless, the one that generates arbitraries for us. So we don't even need any imports. Okay, so in fact, if we go to the example suite. In fact, maybe I should open this. Okay, so we have the test suite, we have the example suite, which uses the test suite, and as of right now, it just uses the hello world. So maybe we can actually start running all the tests. Okay, so before we do anything, we're actually going to create another test suite, which will be dedicated for for testing JSON stuff. Okay, so we're going to create a new file over here. We're going to call it JSON suite.scala. All right, I prefer to have my packages like this. All right, so over here we're just going to do import io.circe testing arbitrary instances, right? So these are going to be the instances that we're going to use for JSON. We're also going to import org type level discipline Scala test fun suite discipline. And what discipline is doing, it's a teeny tiny library. It's literally just like, I don't know, maybe 6 files or something, right? And what it does is that in functional libraries like cats and stuff, you have type classes and you have instances for those type classes, and also you have laws that these type classes have to abide. For example, the monadic laws or the functor laws. Okay, and they all come with a machinery to for when you define your own instances to check against these laws. And all this discipline is doing is it basically gives you the integration in our particular case with Scala tests and a fun suite just to check against these laws with just a couple of lines. Okay, so if you remember, in fact, my video about monocle, I didn't know at the time that discipline existed, so we did it manually, and we had to add a bunch of dependencies and add a bunch of imports. Okay, so this thing is going to make it much simpler for us. So similar to test suite over here, where we're creating a trade test suite and it extends a bunch of things, we're going to do the same thing over here. Okay, so we're going to go and we're going to say this is going to be a JSON test suite, and it is going to extend our test suite. Right, so it's going to extend, this test suite, with a bunch of these. Okay, and all we need to do over here, we also need to say that it's going to use the fun suite discipline, this one, and it will also use this guy over here. All right, and maybe it's going to be too long. Okay, perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. Okay, now usually when I create these traits, I usually like my tests to just import, just extend them and not need any extra imports. Okay, so for example, these ones. Okay, so if you look at the example suite, there are no imports over here, right? It just extends it and everything works. So we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to go over here and we're going to say this is going to be a final protected val. Usually it's not a good idea to have vals in traits, but in this case it's going to work out. So I'm just going to delegate basically this thing to that guy. Okay, so if we actually go jump in there, we're going to see that it's this thing, and it will allow us to basically generate tests for us. Okay, so now that we have this thing, we can actually go and create our example JSON suite. So this is an example suite. We're going to go create example JSON suite. So it's going to be example JSON suite Scala. And by the way, I'm going to upload this thing somewhere so that you guys can copy paste all of this stuff. Okay, so as already mentioned, I prefer to have my packages like this, and we're going to go and we're going to say final class example JSON suite. It extends JSON test suite like this. Okay, this is all we need, and it says that it doesn't exist. Okay, JSON test suite. Hold on. Oh, there we go, JSON test suite, and we should probably rename the file as well. JSON test suite like this, example JSON suite. Okay, cool. This is all we need, but as of right now, there are no tests actually, so we're still running only the hello world that comes from the example suite. Okay, so usually, the same as in the example suite, we would go and we would write our test like this. We're using the functional style, and over here in the example JSON suite, we don't need to do any of this. Okay, we can just go and we can just say check all and pass in a couple of parameters, and we're going to jump into check all in just a couple of seconds, and I'm going to show you that it will generate 4 tests for us. Okay, well, technically 4 tests, but they're property driven tests, so each of these tests is going to generate like hundreds of examples. Okay, so we're going to call it somehow, and this is sort of like a prefix. So we're going to say that this is going to be a codec for person, and we're going to say codec tests, okay, for person. And by the way, codec tests is that thing that we just did over here, right? So it's this thing. Okay, example JSON suite. Okay, codec test for person, and we're going to go and we're going to say codec. Okay, so if I did everything correctly, it still should not compile because it still needs equality. Usually in functional programming libraries in the Scala ecosystem, we don't like to use the equality that comes from any. We use the type class based equality. So we need to have somewhere an instance of this cats eq, and usually I put them into my data structure itself. Okay, so over here we have a codec, and we're also gonna put our EQ instance in here as well. So we need to do implicit val EQ person, and EQ dot from universal equals like this. For this, we also need to import cats, so we have we have the EQ. Okay, cats like this. All right, so you might be wondering why we're putting this into the production code even though we're using it only for the test. Well, usually if you're sort of diving into these functional libraries, at some point you're also want to use it in production as well. So I usually put them in here. Let's take a look at what it did. So it ran 4 tests, but as already mentioned, these are property-based tests. So it actually ran like probably 400 of them. So if we go back to the example JSON suite, okay, over here, which compiles now, we're going to see that this is what the prefix was used for, codec person. Let me also jump into check all so that you see that all it's doing is basically a for loop, and inside of the for loop, it's creating these tests, okay, these 4 tests. So this is how it works, okay, but nothing prevents you from going and writing also something over here, right? Oh, come on, like this, okay, and doing something like 1 should be 1. Okay, so you can just add your own test to this thing. Okay, there's nothing special or weird about it. Okay, it just generates calls to the function test. Okay, this is just a current function anyway. Let's see what it tests. It actually tests consistency, decoder, encoder, and the round trip. Now if you wanted to look into them, we would need to jump over here into codec, and we would see that it's doing the round trip, and it's doing the consistency, and it's doing the encoder and decoder serializability, right? So we could go in here and see what exactly it's doing. Like for example, for this one, it encodes and then it decodes and it sees that the same thing came out as before, right? So you can go over here and check out exactly what it is doing. Basically, make sure that it's consistent with the accumulating behavior of the of accumulating errors and so on. Okay, but we don't need to dive into all of this, right? So essentially, it's all the tests that you need. Let's now talk about golden testing and the problem that it solves. The problem that it solves is that everything that we just did was generated for us, which is kind of cool. It saves us the boilerplate. However, it maintained the consistency only within our project. However, if this was, for example, a server, and we would return this JSON as a response, and then we would actually break the client's API if we were to change something. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that if you go and add something like an email string over here, right, and we're going to go over here and we're going to say that the email is going to be a@b.com. Okay, now everything is going to be regenerated, right? All the arbitraries, all the tests, like all of these properties, everything was regenerated so that we don't have to write any boilerplate, so everything is still green. However, we broke the client API. Okay, and usually what you would do, you would go and manually add an example, right? An example, so something that is not generated, obviously it would catch this error, and this is exactly what golden testing is going to solve for us. So we need to go into the build file, and basically instead of circe testing, it's going to still have the dependency on circe testing. Okay, we're going to say circe-golden over here, right? And the version is a little bit different. Okay, so it doesn't align, it's not aligned with all the others. Okay, let's import changes and go back to the terminal. So for now, we didn't do anything with golden testing, and everything is still going to compile because, as I already mentioned, circe-golden has a dependency on circe testing. Okay, but all we need to do now is we need to go into our JSON test suite over here, and we're just gonna copy paste this, even though I made a lot of copy pasting mistakes from my previous videos, but still, I'm going to pay attention this time. Okay, so we're going to call this one golden codec test. Okay, and we're going to say that it's going to delegate to io.circe-testing.golden. Okay, and over here it's still going to be called golden codec test. Okay, so we're just going to add this new thing. Okay, and now nothing changed still. Okay, because we're not using this val. So let's go back to our example JSON suite. Let me duplicate this line over here. I'm going to say golden codec, and over here I'm going to say, instead of codec test, we're going to say golden codec test, and over here we're also going to say golden codec. Okay, so over here we're going to say golden codec. Okay, and in fact right now we don't need this anymore, because this one, it will do exactly the same thing, plus it will add to property-based test. Okay, so if I open this, it should generate a file for us. And there we go. Inside of testing, inside of resources, it created this file for us. Okay, so let's jump in there. Okay, so it basically generated an example for this. Okay, so let's actually collapse this one. So as you can see, it's exactly all of the same things as before, but it also has like this one, it's the encoding and also the decoding for golden files, which is super cool. So the first time it ran, it realized that there was no file like this, so it generated one. And the next time it runs, before running all of the property-based tests, it's going to run this particular example. Okay, and if you look at the name of the file, it's going to be called person.json, and over here in the middle, you're going to see like there's a hyphen over here, and you're going to see I believe that there are some. I believe that this is the seeds that are used for the for the Scala check arbitraries. Okay, which is also a bit annoying. I wanted to mention this a bit later in the end of the video, but I'm going to show this to you now. If you look at these seeds, it starts with a 7 and ends with like JF. But if I remove this file, okay, it will be regenerated with a different seed, right? So the number is now different. Okay, so it's a bit annoying for version control. In fact, let's actually talk about version control. So if I go into the folder over here, into golden playground, and I have an alias called a GI, which will just initialize a Git repository. It will just add everything, and it will commit everything as an initial commit. Okay, so I'm going to do GI. So if I go over here now, and we're going to go and we're going to change something. Okay, so we're going to go and, for example, we're going to remove this email again, like this, and we're going to remove the email from the person, like this. Okay, now 4 tests are still going to pass, right? So the same ones, as before, they're going to pass, but this one is not going to pass. Okay, so it's going to say label of failing property expected this, but I received only this, and you can see that the email is missing. Okay, it should be another one that failed, and it's going to say okay, this one I believe is a little bit harder to read because we removed a field. Okay, but anyway, in this case you have to decide, okay, did I was this change intentional or not? And in this case, we changed the production code. Let's say that it was intentionally, which means that we need to go and we need to regenerate this file. How we're going to do this? Well, we're just going to delete it, and circe is going to regenerate it for us, and now all the tests are going to be green. So if we go over here now, it basically removed the email. However, the seeds changed and everything changed. Okay, so if we go and I'm going to do GST, it's gonna so GST, if you're not familiar, I'm using ZSH, and ZSH comes with a bunch of Git aliases. So GST is just Git status. Okay, so it says that we modified the main, we deleted the source test resources, and now we have an untracked file. Okay, so in fact, let's do GA. Okay, so hold on. So alias GA. GA is basically just git add. Okay, so we're just gonna add everything, and let's also look at the diff. GDS. So this is a diff was the stage. Okay, so we removed the file, we removed the field, we removed the email, and we basically regenerated this entire file, right? So it was like this. Now it's completely different, and it doesn't have an email. In fact, maybe we should go and look at this in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so these are our changes. Okay, so this is for the main, right? We obviously removed one field, and we removed this entire file, and we created this entire file. Okay, so now we can say, oh, okay, so we're happy. So let's just, commit everything. So I'm gonna do gcam. Okay, hold on. I'm so used to using these aliases. Okay, so gcam is git commit -am, right? So basically commit everything and specify the message. Gcam, we're gonna say, okay, removes the email field. All right, like this. Okay, and let's do it the other way around. Let's go and add it back. So let's do email string. And I just want to show you the error messages. Okay, so let's go over here. I'm going to say a b.com. All right, so let's go. It's going to fail now, the same as before, and we can go and we can. Well, actually, I wanted to show you the error messages. Okay, so let's go and see the error messages. Okay, so this one is basically the same, expected like these two, but it also got the email. Okay, you kind of had to parse it like manually a little bit, but it's not such a big deal. And over here, like this time, you actually see that that there was something added, right? So in this case, it's more helpful. So when you're adding fields, the error message is a little bit more helpful. Okay, let's actually reset all of that. So there's another alias grhh. It's gonna do git reset hard. So grhh. Okay, so none of that stuff actually happened. And let's go to our main and like this. Let's actually go and rename something. So let's say that this one is now called h2. I just want to see, the error messages. Okay, so this one is gonna now say, okay, over here, H and H2, you kind of see it visually, unless it's like super huge. And over here, you're also gonna see the name. Let me also show you that if you have another JSON, that you can still put all the tests in the same file. Okay, so let's do final case class, and it's gonna be called data. It's gonna have some character, which is a char, and it's gonna have some boolean, which is a boolean, and let's do object data, and it's gonna have the, well, actually I can just copy these. Okay, did not learn anything from the previous video where I copied stuff and a bunch of stuff broke, like this data, like this. All right, cool. So let's go and actually remove the person one, delete this one. All right, so that everything is green. Okay, and we can go into the JSON. Well, actually, let me keep it open like this. All right, so JSON to example JSON suite, and okay, let me create a little bit more space like this. Okay, so we can duplicate this one, and we can just say, okay, do the same thing for data. I just want to show you that you can, you don't need to create a separate test file for every teeny tiny little JSON. Okay, you can just put them all in here. It's going to generate like 6 property-based tests for all of them, and it's going to generate these files for all of them. Okay, cool. So this is what's inside of data, and this is what's inside of person. Now, this is pretty much all I have for you today, but before I leave, let me mention a couple of gotchas. The first one is the library uses some heuristics to determine where to put these files. So if you have some, moderately complex SBT build, you might need to do a little bit of tinkering for, to make sure that it puts the files where you want them to be put into. The second thing is that, in this case, we allowed the Scala shapeless library to generate our arbitraries, so we can pretty much be sure that they're going to be the same. However, if you're defining your arbitraries yourself and you're changing them, then these files are going to change. All right, so it's going to lead to some churn into your version control. Also, if you configure Scala check a little bit differently, for example, if you let it run more examples than before, then this is also going to lead to a change in your files. And the fourth thing is the one that I already mentioned. If you simply delete them, the name is going to change. Okay, so again, it's going to lead to some churn in your version control. Let's delete this one. For example, this one starts with 8LC. Okay, so we're going to go and delete this one. Okay, because we're doing the continuous running of the test, it's going to regenerate them, and as you can see, it's a different one now. In any case, the benefits clearly outweigh the cost, so if I were you, I would definitely take circe-golden for a spin. And that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of long Circe series, and as always, it's been Vlad, devinsideyou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you learned something today, consider supporting me on Patreon and thus watch my videos before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.